All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're breaking down the incredibly complex and politically charged story behind the release of the Epstein Files and how this whole thing came to a head in Washington.
Right, so how on earth did it come to this? How did you have a former president and a former Secretary of State staring down the barrel of being held in contempt of Congress? Well, it all started with a really high-stakes political showdown.
So, picture this. It's early 2026, and Washington is absolutely buzzing with this extraordinary possibility that Bill and Hillary Clinton could actually be held in contempt of Congress. We're talking hefty fines, maybe even jail time. A huge deal. For months, you had this intense back and forth playing out. The Republican-led House Oversight Committee was adamant, saying you don't get to dictate the terms of a subpoena. But the Clintons' lawyers fired right back, calling the whole thing an invalid political retribution campaign.
And the pressure was absolutely immense. In a crucial committee vote, the contempt charges moved forward. And what's really notable here is that you actually had some Democrats crossing the aisle to vote with Republicans. They argued that transparency in this investigation was just more important than party politics. So, literally at the last minute, with a vote by the entire House of Representatives just days away, the Clintons blinked. They agreed to testify. But this crazy standoff left everyone asking the same questions. Why now? And what in the world was in these files that could cause such a massive political firestorm? To really get why there was so much pressure to see these files, we gotta go back a bit. Back to a big promise made on the campaign trail in 2024.
Yeah, see, during his presidential campaign, Donald Trump and his team made it a talking point. They promised over and over again they would release the government's files on Jeffrey Epstein. And, that really tapped into a huge public demand for answers.
But then, after the election, everything changed. After an internal FBI review, the Department of Justice dropped a bombshell memo that just shocked a lot of his supporters. They concluded there was no so-called client list, no proof of blackmail, and that the case was, for all intents and purposes, closed.
And then came the full 180 from President Trump himself. He went on the attack, calling the very idea of the files a hoax cooked up by his opponents. And he even lashed out at his own supporters who still wanted to see them released. You can probably guess what happened next. This complete flip-flop from the White House caused a huge backlash. Congress was frustrated, victim advocates were pushing hard, and a lot of people decided, okay, if the president won't do it, we will. And this is where it gets fascinating, legislatively speaking. You had this incredible bipartisan team-up, folks like Republican Thomas Massie and Democrat Ro Khanna, and they used this super rare, kind of a break glass in case of emergency tool called a discharge petition to force a vote, whether leadership wanted one or not. And once that ball got rolling, it was unstoppable. This whole effort led straight to the House passing the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which was a law that basically mandated the Department of Justice release all of its Epstein-related records. I mean, just look at these numbers. 427 to 1? That is not a vote, that is a statement. The pressure was just overwhelming. The bill then flew through the Senate with a unanimous vote and, get this, was signed into law the very next day. All right, so after all that political chaos and legislative maneuvering, the files were finally coming out. But the big question is, what's actually in them? Okay, first things first, and this is super important, this is not one single client list. When we say the Epstein Files, we're talking about a gigantic archive, over 6 million pages of material from the FBI's investigations into Epstein and his whole network. And the stuff inside? I mean, it's everything you can imagine. We're talking FBI interview notes, financial records, private emails and text messages, contact books, plus this huge trove of over 180,000 images and 2,000 videos. It's a real window into his entire operation. But here's a really important reality check from people who've spent years on this, like reporter Julie K. Brown. She points out that the so-called list is kind of a red herring. Epstein and Maxwell collected contact info from pretty much every important person they ever met. So it was basically a massive address book. Being in it doesn't automatically mean you did anything wrong. So you'd think releasing this mountain of information would close the book on this, right? Well, not exactly. In a lot of ways, it's just opened up a brand new chapter of questions. And here's one of the biggest points of controversy right now. The DOJ said there were over 6 million relevant pages. but they only released a little over 3 million to the public. The Justice Department says, hey, we did what the law required. But critics are looking at that huge gap and asking, where is the other half?
So yeah, this fight is far from over. You've got people pointing to these millions of withheld pages, these heavy redactions that black out names and key info. And there are even accusations that the DOJ is still holding back some of the most important stuff, like victim interviews. The big question is, have we really seen the full picture yet?
At the end of the day, the whole saga of the Epstein Files really makes you think, doesn't it? It shows that even when you win a huge political battle to force open the doors of government secrecy, the view you get inside can be way more complicated and raise even more questions than anyone ever saw coming.